Okay, this podcast is not for those of a sensitive disposition. It's not a feel-good podcast. It's an attempt to convey some level of reality or to communicate the nature of the reality that we live in. Now, if you want some feel-good video, then I'd suggest you go and look at Eckhart Tolle. In fact, any of the sort of modern day new age type things that are being broadcast on YouTube. Whether these things have ever done any good is questionable. They're sort of like tranquilizer shots. You go and look at them. You find something that sort of empowers you a little bit for a while, and then half an hour later you're back to your normal state. That's the way it works. And it works that way because fundamentally there's no core basic truth involved. People are skirting around the issues. How long is it? 40, 50 years since the New Age movement came about. People being interested in Eastern religions and things like theosophy and goodness knows what. Has the world benefited in any way from all of this? Well, I would say not. The world seems to be in a rather poorer state today than it was 50 or 60 years ago. The pressures on people are more intense. People treat each other more poorly in many respects. And the New Age movement seems to have not delivered one jot of what might be called an improvement to people's lives. Now, let's just quote a few numbers. I believe that about 15,000 children died every day from the effects of poor water supplies and malaria. Now, these are not just, poof and they're gone deaths. These are long, lingering deaths. Happens every day. And I think about 3 million people a year die from cancer around the world. Again, these are not just poof and they're gone. These are long, lingering deaths that, for each individual and their family, are truly horrific events. Now, in the face of all this, we try and comfort ourselves, obviously, because the realization of these things is painful. And the reality is, we're all going to die at some point. And the great machine of nature continues to churn along with little regard for any particular individual. So, one of the greatest inventions of the human mind was the notion of a personal God. A God that was something akin to Santa Claus in the sky, who's looking down on us and, in some respects is judging us, or at least according to the Christian and maybe Islam religions. But also offers the prospect of alleviating our suffering and maybe even working for our benefit. The horrific Christian movement of abundance is just an extreme example of all of this. The big daddy in the sky, if you are sufficiently subservient and all the rest of it, will give you a life of plenty. It's just, it's nearer to a child's fairy tale more than anything else. And yet people do derive some kind of comfort from it. Well, I say they derive some kind of comfort from it. The reality is that along with this big daddy in the sky is the emotion of hope. The hope that Big Daddy is going to bestow some kind of favours. Well, what's the other side of hope? The other side of hope is fear. So if you're going to indulge in that kind of thing, then you have to also live with the fear that it might not happen. And also, if you believe, then you're also going to have to entertain doubt. I know some Christians, very nice people, typically more pleasant people than many that you meet. But they live in a kind of purgatory. They want to believe. They pray endlessly. They plead for some kind of salvation. And yet also, in their more honest moments, they will say that their belief is plagued with doubts. Of course, the theologians make all kinds of fanciful stories around this, but that's the bottom line. It's sort of a bit like a zero-sum payoff. You get the benefit of believing in a beneficial big daddy in the sky, but the price you pay is that you have constant doubt. And your hope that things will somehow be transformed into something beautiful and wonderful are offset against the fear that actually maybe all you're doing is talking to yourself. So this is the reality of life. Life is what seems to be this huge, great machine that just trundles along. Now, Gurdjieff had his own cosmology around all of this. And in fact, I'm fairly sure that somewhere he just referred to the planet as a pain factory. And it would be easy to see why he might say that. So, what are we to do if the reality is that the universe is just this huge machine chunking along, and we are, well, I was going to say accidental, but not accidental. We have just evolved or emerged from various processes that have taken place within matter. And that, for many people, is a fairly bleak scenario. Well, let me just read a little bit from Spinoza, because the kind of beliefs we have cause all kinds of problems for us. So he says, after men persuaded themselves that everything which is created for their sake, they were bound to consider as the chief quality in everything that which is most useful to themselves, and to account those things the best of all which have the most beneficial effect on mankind. Further, they were bound to form abstract notions for the explanation of the nature of things, such as goodness, badness, order, confusion, warmth, cold, beauty, deformity, and so on. And from the belief that they are free agents arose the further notions praise and blame, sin and merit. So, because we have this human-centered view of the world, then we view earthquakes as bad, and we view nice sunny days down at the beach as good. Obviously, because one is a pain, or creates pain, and one is perceived as being beneficial to us. Back to the notion of this loving, caring God. I suppose many of you will be familiar with the old argument that if God was all good and all powerful, as some believe him to be, then why doesn't he change things? And then we have to introduce some more ideas to sort of get around that. It's ideas of the devil and sin, and we're not good enough, and so on and so forth. The get-outs. Or if God is all good but not all powerful, then clearly he's not God. What is more powerful than God? Or God may not be good and all powerful. Which for our human senses may actually make more sense. But then, of course, you are judging what is good by what is good for us, and not good for the universe as a whole. So, because we are essentially animals with the basic drive to survive, we do everything within our power to ensure that survival, usually at the expense of other species and at the expense of each other. This is how it works, and I've covered this in other videos, but essentially the only controlling mechanism we have on these raw animal instincts, united with a powerful intelligence, is to use reason, because our intelligence has allowed us to build the atom bomb. But underneath it all, we're still animals, and we still are ruining our environment because we have no intelligence in that arena. The only way we manifest our intelligence typically is to enhance our own power, or the power of our nation, or whichever group we happen to identify with. And so this is the situation we're in. We're essentially afraid because we find ourselves in a universe where there seems to be just only mechanical laws operating. Man is also given the ability to think things out, in other words, to use reason. Now, the reason I'm talking about here is not the reason of building an airplane, the mathematics and the engineering and so on. I'm talking about reason applied to the way we live. And so if man was a creature of reason, he would say to himself, it's not a good idea to dump 1 million tons of plastic in the ocean, or chop the rainforest down. But alas, reason is not that strong in us. Our primary driver is our animal instinct to survive. And so, because we're powerful animals, we do dump 1 million tons of plastic in the ocean, with goodness knows what effects on future generations, because we're not that smart. We can apply reason to things that are material, but not to our own behavior in the least. And so maybe man will evolve into being a creature of reason on a collective scale, and maybe he won't. Maybe the animal phase of our existence is basically as far as we're going to go. Now, I guess that all sounds fairly bleak, but there is an antidote to it. And the antidote is called courage. Because somebody once told me that in all kinds of psychological and spiritual work, and I hate that term spiritual, but I can't think of another one, the best strategy to follow is always what he called mirror work. And it basically works like this. If you want to go north, then go south. If you want to go east, go west. If you want to be happy, then do things that don't make you happy. It sounds like nonsense, doesn't it? But actually it isn't. How many self-indulgent people, people who try to gratify their every whim to be happy, do you know that actually are happy? I don't. The people who are able to do that, I know, because I've known some fairly wealthy people. And they are the most miserable, discontented, unhappy people I've ever met. If they could have it within them, and they don't typically, that they do a whole pile of things they don't want to do, then they become happy. Gurdjieff talked about doing the things that we don't desire, which is sort of a oxymoron, I suppose, but that's what he said, and there's some wisdom in it. So, to get back to the main point, to try and relieve our tension, to try and relieve our anxiety about life, our existential anxiety, the best route forward is not to go seeking for what can only be called fantasy spiritual daydreams. You know, the idea that there's some beneficial force in the universe looking after you, when all the evidence points not that way. You can't just blindly ignore the suffering of millions of children and those who are poor and homeless and so on and so forth. You just can't ignore that. So what you need to do, in actual fact, if you want to be happy and content, is go the other way. You need to dig down into the beast of the nature of existence on this planet. And that requires courage. But if you do that, then one day you will arrive at a state where nothing freaks you out anymore. It's like somehow by staring the beast in the face, you can become, what's the word? I was going to say immune to it. Immune isn't quite the right word. You can become bigger than it. Strange thing, but it happens. So the tragedy is that the New Age, as it sort of emerged in the 60s, where people would, put flowers on their bodies and dance around in circles and worship the Earth Mother and so on and so forth, were bound to actually become increasingly unhappy because they're going in the wrong direction. The direction to go is to look at the horror of it all and to do it with courage and honesty. And that's a big ask, because what you are basically requiring of yourself is that you deliberately go into a position of pain, because it's painful to look at these things. The net result is that sooner or later you will find that you are free of these anxieties, and you will be able to accept things as they are. I've just been watching a video by U.G. Krishnamurti. Brilliant man, absolutely brilliant, and had his own kind of realization. And he would probably say pretty much the same thing. So there you have it, that's the way to do it. And in Spinoza, the third part of his ethics is essentially an account of our nature. And it's horrifyingly true and objective. And you need to be brave to read it and understand it. So you need to be a hero. All these old stories of the slayer of dragons are not without some meaning. And you have to slay the dragon of your own dread and fear. And the way you do it is by going into it. Anyway, that's about it.